Something happened 2 days ago that really caught me by surprise. And for the last 2 days, my life on an emotional level has been in turmoil. I've been all over the place. I've been feeling a lot of despair and confusion. I've been sleeping horribly. And I'd like to tell what happened. It was a strange thing. I ordered something in the mail. I ordered a little cassette player that will convert old cassettes, analog cassette audio tapes, into MP3s because I have, I don't know, 30, 35 or so old audio cassette tapes that I made starting back in the 80s when I was a teenager. And I really started making them in earnest in the early 90s once I started playing guitar. And I recorded hundreds of songs that I wrote, and occasionally I would talk a little bit, almost like a journal, into this tape. And I've saved them for years, and for I don't know how many years, more than 10 years now, probably close to 15 years, I haven't even had a cassette player, so I haven't been able to listen to them. And I thought, it's a project that I would like to do, to get rid of these old cassette tapes by converting them into MP3s. Just get them so I can have them in a digital form. I can get rid of more stuff, live a more minimalistic lifestyle, and also not have to worry about what would happen if something goes wrong with these cassettes. I know they don't last forever, and if water gets into the little box that I've held them in or something else goes wrong, then I will lose this artifact of my life forever, this testament to who knows what. So I started converting them on this little cheap device, and it allowed me to listen in while I was making sure that the conversions were working. And I listened to myself talk and sing. And that's what's messed up my life. I don't even know where to start. It's been very, very intense. It made me think also I have to come and record a video about this for various reasons. First reason is just to share about the process of listening to my past self on so many different levels, but also what I thought, because I have been recording a lot of videos recently. I've been doing a burst of video recording here, and listening to those old audio tapes, listening to a time in my life that I actually refer to often in these recordings that I make now, just listening to my voice made me wonder, am I being fair and accurate when I talk about my past self? I wonder if almost like I'm making it sound like my path was even easier than it actually was. What I heard in my voice back from when I was 21, 22, 23 years old was so much despair and confusion and desperation and sometimes grandiosity. I was using grandiosity sometimes to try to pull myself out of my miserable feelings. I could even hear that in a way, just below the surface, I was even kind of suicidal. I was so lost and in such terrible pain. This is before the internet was even out. I had no real allies. I was still very connected to my family system. I would occasionally pull away from them, try to set boundaries, escape to the other side of the world. Some of the tapes that I made were literally in different continents. But then I would come back. Occasionally you could hear one of my parents come in the room when I was recording. Sometimes I was living with them. Again, bouncing back and staying with them for a while in my early 20s. And I felt the main thing that I needed to give justice to in talking here was how I did come out of that. It's almost like it's a miracle that I came out of that, because I really didn't know how to get out of it. And I knew I was desperate back then. I knew my life was very scary. It was very confusing. I knew I was very passionate and very alive. And I also knew that I just had no idea how to get out of it. And it's like, I did get out of it. It's frankly amazing, but it's like, how? I think a big part of it was figuring out how to plug into society and work and make money. literally how to become independent. I think that cannot be underestimated. I can't stress that enough, because I remember when that happened, when I really started figuring out how to do it in earnest, not in any grand or fancy way. I started working as a kind of a receptionist, a secretary. I got my first big job in New York, big. I was, getting $10 an hour. What's that like? It was barely minimum wage. It was hardly livable in New York City. This is in 1997. I got it because of my typing skills. But it saved my life. It was like life had thrown me a lifeline. And externally, it was like life had told me, you can live independently. You don't have to be dependent on your parents. And I really wasn't dependent on my parents financially, but at some level I still was. I mean, I was living off savings. I was actually living with my mom for a while at that point when I got that job, and she was kicking me out. It was a horrible time. And so that's one part of it, working. But that wasn't enough, because even after I started working and making money and moving out of my mom's and living with a roommate, I was 25 when that happened. I still was so isolated and lonely and despairing. And a big thing that saved me was finding a place where I could speak. For me, the first place that I could do that was Al-Anon, the 12-step group for families of alcoholics. I stopped going after a couple of years. It wasn't a fit for me anymore. It wasn't a place where I could talk in a deeper way about really wanting to break away from my family. I couldn't talk about the traumas that my mother had done to me. In this program for families of alcoholics, we were supposed to support the alcoholic. That's one of the traditions of Al-Anon. And it was like, support my mom? I'd done that my whole life. It was killing me to support her, to always forgive her. Forgiveness was big in that group too, and forgiveness wasn't working for me. But when I got into that group, it was another lifeline that had been thrown to me, because even though it was imperfect, it was a place where I could speak. I could speak about my feelings. I could listen to other people talk about their feelings. And I started realizing I wasn't so alone. Although my life was still very messy on the inside, it's like there were other people who had messy lives. And I came from a world, a fancy college background, a family system, a fancy family system, where people didn't admit to having problems. They weren't open about having problems. Everybody seemed so perfect and so together, and everybody was doing so great, and everybody bragged about how great they were doing. And I wasn't doing that. It was that I was more honest. I could hear that in my voice on tape after tape after tape, this desperation in my voice, this sadness, the pain. Also, when I listened to myself sing these songs, some of this is going back nearly 30 years. My voice was literally different. And it was like I was a mature adult on a physiological level, but my voice was so tight by comparison. It was like I couldn't afford to be me. My spirit wasn't allowed to come out in the world that I was living in, the world connected to my family system, my social world that was so much like my family system. It was a world that had its hands around my throat, and I had my own hands around my throat, because I knew that if I spoke out and was honest, I would die in this world. They would kill me. I might have literally died. And I heard that in my voice, just this incredible tension that I was holding inside. I was holding in knowledge of my traumas. I wasn't aware of really what had happened to me, certainly not in any context or perspective. I wasn't aware of all the feelings I was holding inside, and I was holding in so many feelings. There was so much pain. In many ways, I was still more than 10 years away from letting so many of the cries of my soul out. That took a long time after I got jobs, after I was in Al-Anon and out of Al-Anon, even after I'd made better friends who could really hear much more of a full scope of me, after I'd spent years developing a deeper relationship with myself. And all this time, by the while, I was journaling and journaling and journaling and doing so much self-healing. It took a long time before a lot of the deeper tsunami waves of grief came out of me. That was until my mid-30s, a lot of it, early to mid-30s. But 10 years before, it was just this torment. And it's just like, I'm thinking, I've been reflecting for 2 days since I started listening to just bits and pieces of those tapes. I haven't even listened to much of it. I've been working all the time and making these videos actually and trying to live my life. And I figure I'll go back and listen to all these tapes all at some point and go through and listen to 30 or 40 or however many hours of tapes there are. But I'm thinking, what would I have done differently back then? What could I have done differently? And that's also what's so confusing, is no clear answer comes to my mind. It's like, what could I have done differently? It's like, what books could I have read? I mean, how could I have gotten away from my family more easily? How could I have set better boundaries? I don't know if I could have, actually. Sometimes I think maybe I did literally the best I could have done given what I had. I do think it's a miracle in a way that I got out. I also hear my strength when I listen to this. I hear like there was just something in me that couldn't give up, that couldn't kill myself, that couldn't buckle down and push all the rest of my feelings down and become normal like my family wanted me to do, like my college friends in my college world and professors wanted me to do, like my society wanted to do. I just couldn't do it. There was some part of me that was like literally unable to do what I was supposed to do and push those feelings down and be normal, be a good little boy in a functional, intelligent, sophisticated adult man's body. I couldn't do it. And so it was like the roll of the dice that I got in my life was this roll of the dice that said, you're going to want to be normal, you're going to want to fit in, but you are fundamentally going to be unable to do it. And it was like, this was my conflict. And it was like, all I could do was self-explore. No wonder I got interested in psychology. No wonder I got interested in looking within. I realized at some level that was the only thing that could save me. Because all along the way, even back then, I figured it out. Even right at the very beginning when I started self-exploring, when I started writing in a journal just before I turned 18 years old, I realized this self-reflective relationship with myself was saving my life. It was giving me an ally when I had no other allies. And for a long time, really, this was my big ally. My self-reflective relationship with myself through my journal, through my meditative process, through even recording these songs and tapes. So many of these songs I recorded were about my internal process. Searching also for love externally. This was a big part of my search back then. I thought I could find the perfect female, the perfect romantic partner who would love me, who would hold me, who would care for me, who would understand me, who would be the perfect parent for me, the parent that my parents never were. It's almost like a cliche, you know, the guy who's looking for the perfect mom. But it's a cliche also, the girl who's looking for the perfect dad out in the world and a romantic partner. But I really was. And it's interesting, when I delineated what I was looking for in this perfect female, this perfect partner, I was actually very accurately depicting what I needed to be for myself and what eventually, slowly, I did become for myself in a bigger way. And even back then, to a degree, I was doing that for myself. I was holding myself at night. I was giving myself support. I was working to love myself. I was trying to live healthier. I mean, early 20s, I was still occasionally smoking pot and still getting drunk and trying to hook up with girls. And I pretty much cut all of that out of my life. By the end of my early 20s, it's like I realized this is killing me. This makes me feel horrible about myself. It isn't helping me move forward. Some of the stuff can make me feel good in the short term. And I was desperate for anything that would make me feel good in the short term, but the long-term consequences were worse. I saw that. I was self-reflective enough to figure that out. I was able to, in a way, write down the data about myself to learn. It's like I was able to use my brains to figure out some of this stuff. But God, listening to this, I wonder if I could sum all this up, what message I would have for someone who hears this. And I guess what I would say is, please just don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your healing journey. Keep struggling, keep trying to find allies wherever they might be. Try to set boundaries with the people who don't love you and don't listen to you and don't respect you. Figure out whatever strategically you can do to get away from them, to become more independent, to figure out how to live and survive independently in this unloving society that doesn't like emotionally independent people, to do whatever it takes to stand on your own 2 feet and fight for yourself. And I just don't know if in some of my other videos I didn't stress this enough. Maybe I have, maybe I really have and I don't realize it. Maybe I've done it in a little bit more of an intellectual way. Maybe I've done it with a little bit more distance. I think I've said all these things many, many, many times, but now in a sort of a state of semi-exhaustion and this deep unsettled feeling inside me that's come from just connecting so deeply with my pain, having it like thrown in my face in these little bursts through a foreign headphone. And it's just this incredible reminder that drives me here, drives me to speak again and to actually do, in a strange sort of way, the same thing that I was doing all those decades ago. Speaking in front of a device that records it so that somehow I can be useful to somebody.